Um, I won't put any words in his mouth in the sense of how we met or anything like that, but we got introduced by a mutual friend of ours, and yeah, there's lots of stuff to get through, so we may as well dive right in. But firstly, Rob, keeping it real, how are you this evening? How are you feeling?
Yeah, doing good, thanks, mate. Thanks for having me on. It's really nice to get to finally chat. I know we've been saying we'd do this for a while, so everything's good, mate. It's been quite a busy one the last few days, but dropping the pace now tonight, sitting back on the sofa with you.
Yeah, on the sofa, cup of tea, can't go wrong.
Exactly, yeah.
So what I'm going to get you to do for me, Rob, and I know this is it's a weird one. People always feel a little bit uncomfortable about it for some reason. Is just to talk about yourself a little bit, in the sense of give us an idea of, your upbringing, potentially a little bit of your family life, a little bit of things that you think relevant, those milestones along the way. And then I'm sure I have loads of questions from even that, and then we'll get the ball rolling with some of the subject matter that we want to touch on tonight.
Sounds good, mate.
Take it away, brother. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in North London, and I went to a state school. Had an amazing bunch of friends there, like very mixed race school. So we had like every type of culture, which I now can look back at and think that was really nice that I had that exposure to lots of different cultures in North London where we were. And then I guess, yeah, when I was a teenager, I love music and I love sport. And I was kind of a bit at a crossroads of whether I wanted to kind of go down the music route. I wasn't super musical, but I loved it. And I was thinking about music technology as a sort of potential career. But I opted for the human physiology kind of way. So went to decided my A-levels around that, and then did my undergraduate degree in physio. I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but for me it was always like I love people. I love working with people. I love interacting, and for me to fall into a career that I was working with individuals, improving their lives, was kind of always where my heart was from quite a young age, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds like you made that decision. From everything you're saying already, it sounds like you made that decision quite early on, that you knew that you wanted to, you already career minded or career focused from an age before you even had to get to those decisions. So there's like that premeditative accumulation of skills and direction, kind of, almost.
Yeah, I guess for me it was like we were kind of forced at our school to make that decision, and yeah, for me it was like it didn't feel comfortable at the time to be so vocational and make a decision about your future, but yeah, I don't really look back with any regret, which I'm grateful for. I'm happy I chose the path I did, and I've had some amazing journeys and experiences along this career, and a lot of it I didn't plan as well. So, but I think it's interesting if you look at the current world with social media and everything. It must be a whole different world now for being like a 17-year-old coming into the world and seeing all these kids like becoming self-entrepreneurs at a young age and stuff. So yeah, it's
yeah, I mean the path to success used to be quite a linear one, didn't it? I guess, and now there's so many different ways, because you've got so many when it comes to like marketing and reach and stuff. Any person has got the whole world at their fingertips if they've got enough nous about them to make some waves. So that's definitely, yeah, it's definitely an interesting comparison. What was interesting to me, you used the word, you said force, like you were forced into those decisions when you were younger. Is that because the school that you went to, was it quite elite, or would they just expected this from you? Why do you think that was?
Yeah, well, yeah, we went to we were at a school. It was a state school, but it was quite academic. So you had to do an exam to get in. And I slipped in, actually. I was on the waiting list, and I'm really glad that I went there. But I was surrounded by some super bright people. A lot of them went on to Oxbridge and stuff, and I guess there was a certain pressure on us that it wasn't extreme, but there was, my parents certainly never put any pressure on me, but it was almost like you have to make a decision about your future and you have to decide a vocation. I remember even we had these like classes that were about career choice, and it was almost like we were kind of pinned down to make a decision. So I think in some ways that was positive, and in some ways, definitely would have been pretty hard, I think.
Yeah, I guess it depends on your opinion of pressure, doesn't it? Like there's that cliche saying that pressure makes diamonds. When people rise to the occasion and make it. Did you feel like that there was influence? They took the things that you were strong at and kind of guided you to make a decision in this direction, or was it like an open plethora for you to choose from?
It's a good question. I truthfully can't remember too well, but I do remember thinking quite lost at the time and thinking, how do you actually make the decision to basically determine the rest of your life? That's what it felt like, even though we know it isn't like that. We know if you choose a career, you can change your career 5-6 times, whatever, and a lot of people do. But
I don't think you know that at the time, though, right? I think it feels very overwhelming. It's like, if I choose this one thing now, this is me. I'm done.
Exactly, absolutely. I'm just going to try and sort out before we carry on, mate. I'm just getting 2 audios in my ear here, so excuse me.
It's okay. You do what you got to do, and I'll.
Issues here.
But yeah, no, I appreciate the time you're spending with us this evening. One thing, if you can hear me, and don't worry if I have to repeat the question, is, are you? So talk me through what decisions you made then, and how it got you to where you are today.
One sec, mate. I'm nearly there.
It's all good.
You know what it is because once I loaded our Insta, because I know we've got the other platform, my AirPods were getting confused. Where
you got to turn the Bluetooth off on your phone.
Yeah, that's what I've done now.
And then just turn it down for me on the IGTV, and then we've got turn the volume down there, and then we're good to go.
Sweet. How's that? You hear me all right? Yeah.
Perfect.
Cool. So sorry, mate. Could you say the question again?
The question again is we talked about the pressure and decisions, and it feels like very overwhelming at the time. Talk me through some of the decisions you made with confidence that they've got you to where you are today.
Yeah, I suppose if I simplify it, the first decision when I was like 16, 17 to actually pick a career in health and fitness, originally training to be a physio and then later on working more towards a strength and conditioning coach. So that first decision about vocation was probably the most significant and scary for me, because it was like, this is determining your future. But that was a great decision. As I say, I'm really happy that I chose that career, and I'm now in a position where, I'm able to manage lots of different things within someone's health to improve their quality of life, improve their performance, and it's super rewarding. I've had, I guess another significant one would probably be how I really chase my passions. So, like, I love snowboarding, for example, and I knew that the British team didn't have much of a budget, so they didn't have physio and they didn't have anyone with them. So I was like, I pitched myself to them. I said, look, if you pay for my flights, I'll work for you guys for free. I was like 21. I was straight out of uni, and I think the head coach was like, who is this guy? Like, he's like an amateur. He's not asking for any money, and that was like one of the best decisions I made, because I met some amazing friends. I still know them now. I traveled the world with the snowboarders. I then went on to work with Team Canada, and I was snowboarding with great people. And I did that for like 7-8 years. I was doing other things as well, but and a lot of people at the time probably thought I was a bit mad, because I was like, I wasn't making money, and I was just off, just kind of working for free. But those early decisions where you you go and get experience, so to speak. But I was doing it in such a fun way as well. So yeah,
it's very interesting, and it's fairly relevant to my life at the moment. I've just pitched some of my services for free. It's kind of like people weigh it up differently, but there's that, if you want to get experience is really, really important, isn't it? And I guess you have to get somebody to take a chance on you if it's a step up as well. So you go, I can provide this for you, but I'm not asking anything in return. And then hopefully you add enough value, you do a good job that they, you either got the experience and you can use it elsewhere, or they want you to stay on so much, or they want you to do something, then maybe they will end up, paying you. So I think that's and look at where that experience brought you today. So after working with the Canadian team, you've dabbled in other sports as well, right?
Yeah. I've done quite a lot of different sports. So I've worked with a lot of individual athletes. So I did work with, I've worked with boxers, and I've worked with like sprinters and bob skeleton, judo, wrestlers, footballers, lots of different sports. So that's been really fun. I never did a ton of like team sport work. Like I didn't ever work in pro football or anything, but definitely a big bias towards individual athletes. So now like heavily involved with an F1 driver, Lance Stroll, which is an amazing job, and he's super fun to work with, and it's a super honoured position that I'm in now, because I'm working with great people at the top of their game, and it's very inspiring.
That's amazing, mate. Talk for the layman like myself who don't know too much about F1. Talk me through like what kind of regime or what kind of strength and conditioning would an F1 driver have to do?
That's a good question. They're super fit, these guys. So, I mean, they have to be able to cope with 23 races all over the globe, like all year round, changing time zone, flying around the world constantly. So they've got to be really robust from a sleep and an immune system perspective. But from a fitness perspective, their cardiovascular system is under quite a lot of stress. So they're essentially doing like an interval session when they're in the car. So if you look at their heart rate, it's fluctuating into quite high ranges. And there's a ton of G-force obviously on the body as well. So like if you and me got an F1 car and got thrown around that track, we'd feel physically sick. Like our internal organs wouldn't be able to cope. But these guys are so well adapted internally. They're super fit, and in terms of strength, they mainly have to have really robust like necks and cores. So we do a load of work around strength work for the core and the neck, and making sure that the areas are really strong to cope with the forces that they have when they're in the car. He's training. These guys are training all year round, like constantly, and they get a little bit of a break in the off season, but they still really need to stay on the pace the whole time. So it's pretty relentless.
No pun intended. Yeah, and I guess that's it. Scheduling and time zones is really tricky, and I see that you mentioned sleep, and I don't know if you've added that to your arsenal, your armory of skills that you've not only did these skills accumulate? Like, did you go physio, strength and conditioning? It just keep adding stuff on top.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I guess you can formally study these areas, which I've done with sleep, and I did a course to train as a sleep coach, which just because I was so interested in it. But more than anything, I guess I just ask a lot of questions. So people like Stephen Lockley, Matthew Walker, listen and read their work, and this is such a complex area. People have PhDs in it, so I'm obviously nowhere near that. I've just done some basic postgraduate training, but for me, it's an area I'm really interested in for myself, for coaching clients, athletes particularly, and because I think you can get like 1-2% wins, from sleep. I mean, sleep is way more than 1-2%. It's huge for recovery. It's everything. But what I mean is making small changes to someone's sleep can have have a little bit of impact on their performance and their recovery as well. So for me, it's a big area. Yeah.
So talk me through how important sleep is for not only athletes, but for everyday people.
Well, it's integral to everything we do. You know, it's a big part of our hormones being able to stay in balance. So, you know, we run off a cycle of hormones fluctuating throughout the day. So as we rise in the morning, cortisol gets released and it stays high as we wake, and it will go even higher if we have coffee and if we do exercise. And then around 12 hours after that is when we start getting the melatonin kicking in. And actually getting outside to see sunlight in the morning will impact the effect of melatonin later in the day. So actually getting out nice and early, seeing the sun as it almost rises, or an hour after that, it's really good for maintaining your rhythm. But your question about how important is it? Well, if you're not sleeping enough, you're not going to get your recovery at night. You're not going to get things like growth hormone getting released, and your hunger hormones like leptin and ghrelin are going to get confused. So we all know if you've had like 3-4 hours sleep because you're knackered, you end up craving more sugar, you make worse choices about food, you haven't got any energy to exercise, and that just becomes a spiral. So for me, routine, same bedtime every night, more or less. I mean, obviously it's going to fluctuate, but routine is king. Absolutely, consistency, and then making sure that you follow some basic things that will allow you to have a good circadian rhythm and a good good pattern to your day, which obviously changes if you flip time zones and everything. So it gets
that's when it becomes really tricky, right? So is this a personal question? So what times do you aim for sleep and wake up then?
Probably at the moment I'm like hovering around 10:30 and 6, waking at 6, something like that. But it does vary. I mean, realistically, I've never been able to do the same time going to bed and waking up for longer than a few days. No one does that. So you kind of want to work realistically off like a half an hour window, I guess. So
it's not going to be to the minute.
If I'm sleep low, I'll try and cash in with a nap, or something, or just adapt my day to suit the fact I've had less sleep.
Yeah, exactly. So sleep is, for those who've watched Men's Health a lot, like from the first lockdown, I was pretty much streaming every day, just doing IGTV. And Rob was the person that introduced me to his 4 pillars of fitness, which I'll let him talk me through what those are in his own words. And I adapted those kind of to everyday people, and like maybe a lesser version is maybe not the right word to use, but aiming towards getting normal people like myself motivated. Basically, if you work on these 4 pillars, you'll have a little bit more motivation, and then other things, that's all you need is motivation to do things, and then other things will click into place. And especially with your own mental health, motivation and identity and purpose can have a real driving factor of improving that. So that was just my explanation of where I got it from. And thank you, Rob. If it wasn't for you, then I wouldn't have been telling those things. So tell us in your own words, and maybe like firstly applying to athletes or the work that you do, the pillars of fitness.
Yeah, so I mean, the 4 pillars I often refer to being mind, body, recovery, and nutrition. But that it's not my own philosophy. It's it's been
no.
By obviously there's hundreds of people around the world that talk about similar philosophies, and Hintzer for one, who I work with, they talk about a bigger wheel of 6 pillars. But essentially, the 4 pillars I talk about just optimization, not perfection, because perfection doesn't exist. It doesn't exist for the very best in the world. It's impossible. Humans, we're not designed to be perfect. So it's optimizing. It's getting the most out of each segment. And we know that if one segment's depleted, it will impact on the whole lot. So that's the wheel concept. And, for me, it's kind of trying to understand an individual and find out where perhaps they're weak, or they're perhaps prioritizing things. They might, I've got clients that will say, I'm sleeping really, really bad, but they're eating quite well and they're training pretty consistently. So then it's just addressing that. Well, why why is that the case? And that's been a common theme, to be honest, of 2020, is people aren't sleeping as well. I think because they're more stressed, don't know about what's going on, and it's again going back to the simple side of like routines and what they can do to offload some of that stress that everyone's kind of going through at this time.
Yeah, definitely. So you got was it mind? What do you incorporate in mind when you talk about that pillar of when you're speaking to your clients?
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose mind and recovery overlap quite closely, but within recovery, I would also put sleep. So sleep and recovery are kind of one pillar, but mind would be around mindfulness, the meditative aspects. But with me, the way I kind of define mindfulness is just a task that is in its purity. So like it could be someone listening to music in its purity, nothing else, going for a walk and not listening to anything, playing golf and going out with a friend and, you know, not looking at your phone. That for me is a form of mindfulness. So that's kind of, for me, that's what I heavily preach within that mind pillar, is find what makes you distance yourself from reality or from the world. What single thing gives you pleasure, but you can enter that kind of sort of meditative state where you're not actually processing thoughts. And everyone's different there. So like for me, it's, you know, training falls into that. Like certain types of training, like a low intensity run, would fall into kind of a recovery and a mindful state for me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Exercise those habits that you said of focusing on monotasking, focusing on one thing and just appreciating it for what it is. How much does stress levels, you know, and which are very much closely, to my limited knowledge, very much closely related to hormones as well, how much can that impact like an elite athlete's performance?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, stress is good, right? Stress is something that we need to have in our day, and it's, you know, the definition of it is essentially.
I mean, I've never heard someone say stress is good, so I'm so intrigued to where you're going to go with this.
Yeah. So I suppose firstly, it's how are we defining stress? So you could have one definition of stress to say stress is the sensation or the inability to cope with the task placed upon us, the feeling of being stressed. And then there's the other term of stress being, you know, a physiological stress that is advantageous, like a run, a sprint, lifting weights. That's a stress. And all of these things, the reason they're all called stress is because they all spike cortisol and to an extent adrenaline. Why do I say stress is good? Well, we thrive off it, and actually it's part of our life. So if we don't have it, we can often feel empty. But then when we have too much of it, it can become overwhelming. So actually, if you find you're someone, like I've worked with a lot of type A individuals, and to an extent, I'm very much that way myself. And it's the times where you actually switch off and reduce your stress or your stimulus by like 90% is when you kind of feel run down, or you end up feeling super tired because you're suddenly going from being charged to being here. So, you know, I can actually point the listeners to some great research done around stress and how actually the perception of stress affects how it affects you. So if I believe that stress is something I cope with and I'm resilient against, then it's much less likely to impact me physiologically in terms of disease, impact on blood sugar, like longevity. So they actually looked at that. Super interesting. So whereas if you're someone that says the moment you get stressed, you feel like, oh, I'm stressed, this is the worst possible thing in the world, then you end up actually that stress really impacts you. And they did a study on that. So for me, that's just trying to elaborate what I mean by saying that stress is good, but just too much of it isn't good. And you look at some of the most successful people in the world, whether it's athletes or like massive business owners, these guys thrive off stress. And if it wasn't good, then, you know, why would they be successful? So
yeah. There's that I've heard from fitness wise, I've heard it from two different points of view. That's why I was interested in your opinion that, lowering stress levels and being in a Zen state can be optimum for your like muscles firing in a simplistic terms and getting to your peak performance. But then again, spikes of these hormones can elevate you to something that you've never done before if it's honed in the right way. So it's really interesting to think of. And when I'm asking these questions, I'm basically always trying to relate it back to the everyday person who doesn't consider themselves an athlete, but we all have to deal with these stress in our lives, no matter what it is. So I think that's a really valuable tip, is training yourself potentially and having the awareness of how you deal with it can actually have an effect of how it affects your everyday life.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it raises so much debate and thought around the whole what is wellness, and how do we live a balanced life. And for me, I what's really important to me is that I get time within a day to drop it down a level, and that's not just at night, but that's within the day. And I'd rather work on like a really focused mind state of work, whether it's admin or with a client or whatever, and then have a break afterwards, but make sure I'm delivering like 100% in that session. But back in the day, it used to be the opposite. I used to like 12, 14-hour days and have quite demanding clients back to back and try to give 100% all the time. Not, take like 6 minutes to take a lunch break and then go all again. And by the end of the day, I just always felt exhausted because I hadn't managed to bring my nervous system down a notch. So these days, I'm really conscious of that, like making sure that within the day there's some kind of drop in pace. I mean, it's not always to get it every day, but I think it's important for everyone to have that.
Yeah, I guess that's just another example of, you've tried stuff a certain way, you've got self-awareness, and then now you're not afraid to change and try and change your schedule, change your habits to find out what works best for you. When we were chatting just before this, you mentioned about doing some, tell us about this sort of, I was going to say self-discovery, but I'm not sure it was exactly that, but this framework that you started applying to yourself that you did during the lockdown.
Yeah, I came across, I'm sure you've heard of Mind Valley, and maybe a lot of listeners or people tuning into your podcast will know it, but Mind Valley is, it's like there's a big podcast on there talking about a lot of all things mindset, positive mindset, some interesting interviews within the lockdown period. And I was also listening to a lot of Ben Greenfield in America, and a big fan of his work and the guys he interviews. And he'd gone through the process of what's called the Life Book, which is kind of it's an element of Mind Valley, the company. And yeah, basically I signed up, and within the first lockdown, I did it. It's like 12 chapters of your life, and it basically gets you to kind of really define and think about each chapter. The first one's actually health and fitness. So it asks you, where are you? What's important to you? Where do you want to be? So it talks about your purpose and your values. And so it really makes you think. And that was at times like it was difficult to do it because, you had to find the extra time in the day, or some of the topics, some of the chapters were like really difficult for me, like spiritual. So I'm not particularly a spiritual person or a religious person. So, but it takes you out your comfort zone. So, yeah, that was a task that I enjoyed, and I think has made me think about where I'm at and what I want out of life,
But it's interesting when you say about your own health and fitness. You're doing so much work for other people all the time. Mm-hmm. Do you still make sure you find time for your own?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I have to really, because if I don't do that, I can't deliver. And the older I get, I'm 35 now, and it's, I need my sleep even more than I did, certainly more than 10 years ago. So yeah, it's for me, it's a priority that exercise is part of me every day. And if I can't exercise properly, then I'll just do like micro hits throughout the day. So if I've got to do a day at home for some reason with the baby or doing admin or whatever it is, then I'll just pick an exercise and do a ton of it throughout the day in like 2-minute sessions. So yeah, exercise is kind of the king for me, and sleep probably closely follows that. And then my nutrition is kind of stick to the 80-20 rule. So I have a pretty sweet tooth, as most of my mates will know. So 80-20, 80% of the time I'm pretty good, and 20%, well, maybe more like 30.
Yeah, mate, it's all about, especially last year, it's all about it. But yeah, no, I wasn't asking it to put you on the spot. It was just interesting that, you know, like a lot of people, when they get, I guess, to an elite level, start focusing on just their client and just getting results in that sense. So I really appreciate the fact that you know that to be able to do a good job, you need to be running at optimum performance as well. So you need to take all those. You can't be a just do as I say coach. You have to be like do as I do and lead by example.
Yeah, for sure. That's the thing. It's the same with nutrition. Like if you're with an athlete, you can't be sat there having like an apple strudel. Do you know what I mean? But for me as well, I'm also surrounded by like certainly within F1, all the other coaches are pretty fit. Within boxing, my colleagues and my friends within boxing, a lot of them are pretty fit. So you're surrounded by people that like generally look after themselves. So you feel like it's bad if you don't. You feel like everyone's in it together within the industry. So I think that if you're a lazy coach, then I don't know. I can see why it happens, why like clinicians or coaches become overweight or unhealthy or whatever it is, it's not always their fault, because they're managing maybe 3 kids and a massively busy job. But for me, I think you just have to put it at the top of your priority list, to be successful in what you do. It's kind of essential in my opinion.
For sure. Have you ever, one thing that just jumped to my mind about, you work with some really like big sporting stars, whether you want to mention a few or not, it's up to you. But have you ever struggled with, your friendship network, and people like trying to get close to you to get into I don't know what it is, free tickets or something like that? How do you deal with your own support network? Have you just got people from back in the day and known you since day dot, or does that even cross your mind, like trust?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I'm pretty lucky because I have like really old friends that I'm still very tight with, and I have like more recent friends over the last decade, I suppose, as well, and some very close professional friends, like for example Tim Weeks, who we met each other through him. He's someone I really respect and look up to. But yeah, to answer your question, no, I think my friends are really supportive, and I love them all, and I think they've always been really supportive of what I'm doing, and I'm the same to them. And I see it a lot around, I suppose, around individuals that people try to. I think the closer you are to an athlete, the more they will ask you for stuff. But I think most of my mates kind of just they're pretty chilled, and they don't take the piss or anything. So I must be honest. I think I've never really had like leeches around me or anything like that. But I've got good people around me. I'm lucky, to be honest. I'm very lucky.
Yeah, it's interesting when people say that. Good people themselves tend to have good people around them, and I don't know if it's because they're being modest, but just from what I've heard and what I've seen, and I spoke to so many people now, I think it's just kind of what you attract and accept in your life, I guess, isn't it? It's like there's reasons why you've stayed friends with these people for so long, and they kind of you grow and change together. And I think I don't really know what point I'm making, to be honest, but it's just interesting. Yeah.
No, I get it. I think, I mean, if you hit it off with someone, you stay close, and you know, I think within our industry, Elliot, as well, like we're in a space where there's so many great people. Like even when I met you guys in your space, you know, you can just tell if you're going to get on with someone, and like it's a very quick kind of subconscious thing, isn't it? That if you meet a girl or a guy, you know what, they've got something really interesting to say about that, and you hit it off, and you get chatting about philosophies or life or whatever. So yeah, I think for me, I've got a super low threshold for any like dickheads or anything, and if someone is kind of has done something that I think is out of line, or, you know, don't get me wrong, I'll forgive in the right situation, but if someone is a negative energy or whatever, I just sack it off. Like I wouldn't have any interest in spending time with them. I'm pretty direct these days. Like
Good. I think that's it. As you get older, you get more confident in who you are as a person, you know what you want around you. It's interesting you said about having those, you know, that blink of an eye sort of impressions. Did you know, it's something I've watched before or read about, you know, on body language, even just body language of people, that we've got like, there's 4 different groups that we automatically put people in. I'm not sure if you know this or not. I'm not trying to like just go on. No, it's you know, friend, enemy. The one that we put most people into if we're walking down the street is like impartial. You know, there's too many people now, so we just kind of like, and then the 4th one is potential sexual partner. So you've got all 4, you know, and you automatically will put them into. So once you know that information, you'll see yourself make a snap judgment at someone and go, shit, I just put them in that group without realizing. It's interesting.
That's good. No, that's really interesting. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. It's funny, isn't it, that like subconscious enemy body language that you get sometimes in the street. You feel like someone gives you the eyes, like they hate you. You're like, what have I done? And
you'll notice that if you ever touch your stomach, that's a very like primordial place to protect, is your own stomach. So if you ever feel like you put your hands there and you realize now, if you ever do it again in the future, you go, Elliot, tell me about touching my stomach. And you're like, oh fuck, I must not like this person.
Good. It's interesting. Very interesting.
So you mentioned Rob, and it took like almost, you know, halfway into this, or however long we go for, to mention you've got a little one now. How has that been, and has that changed anything for you?
It's changed a lot. Yeah, it's changed a lot for sure. But yeah, no, it's amazing, mate. It's amazing. I have a little baby girl called Sophia. So she's going to be 1 next week. So yeah, in short, it's been an amazing journey, but it's been a lot of hard work as well. So yeah, you know, like I was saying earlier, things like sleep and your fitness routine kind of goes a bit out the window, but that's just normal. You know, you don't sign up to have a perfect sleep and everything. Yeah, my wife's been smashing it, and she's doing great. So yeah, like we'll see. It'll be really fun now as she starts to move around and everything. As she starts to chat, when she gets older, and it's going to be very interesting.
How have you, like feelings wise and stuff? Is the cliche goes like, I'm not a parent, so I don't know anything. I can only talk about what I've heard. But like, is there such things that you felt like overwhelming love potentially, or, you know, like empathy towards your parents, and you realize, fuck, they were just doing the best job that they could, and like thought processes like this kind of thing that started creeping in from this whole new perspective of fatherhood?
Yeah, definitely. Like it's very like super overwhelming the first few days. Yeah, you can't really get your head around it. It's mental. But then, yeah, and sometimes you kind of catch yourself, like you look at them and you're like, oh yeah, kind of, that's a mini version of me. You kind of, you forget, you know, oh yeah, I do have a baby. You come home from work, oh yeah, it's my baby. This is still like, still almost getting used to it, even though it's a year down the line. It's still a bit of a novelty, I guess. But yeah, it was hard. Like, you know, the first lockdown, my parents didn't even meet her for the first few months because we were actually abroad. But that was nice when they did meet her. So yeah, it's been challenging though, bro. I mean, like lockdown and being stuck at home, not being able to see my mates, even my best friends, like seen her twice, I think. So yeah, it's kind of sad, but have to stay positive that we're kind of hopefully coming to the end of that, and we can start embracing a bit more social come summer, and
human contact.
Have some Barbies and good times, hopefully.
This is a really difficult question, and I don't mean to spring it on you, but last Thursday, my friend Lee and I do like a. What's that?
I was going to say I'm the master swerver. If I can't answer it, I'll just take myself around the park and then.
If I were to like have a chat with Sophia and say like, I don't know, 15 years time or something, how would you like her to describe you?
That's a good one. That's a really good question. Yeah, I suppose if I like just use words, fun, supportive, someone I can always chat to, like off the top of my head. Someone who makes me healthy and fit would be cool as well. Like if I can I'll rub off on some of my philosophies on health and fitness, I think hopefully she's going to grow up with, and that will impact her positively. I'm not going to be forceful, but I think growing up, I love her to be active and enjoy all the things we love. So yeah, that would be it. I think fun, having play in life and having fun and having laughter is the most important thing. And then, being there and, being there. So if she needs me, I'm there.
I love all those things, and no doubt that they're going to rub off on her, because what you enjoy, hopefully she'll enjoy as well. And you also mentioned about like being able to chat to at any time. This is something I think everyone I've spoken to who are like young parents now, and something that I would really love for my future children is that openness, that support, emotional support, and openness to be able to have a conversation about anything. And I know there's certain things you don't have conversations with parents about, obviously, and and it's important to have that separation properly. But it's just a difficult one, I think, to even imagine. Like, I don't know, because I don't have children, but like just being that open and that supportive. I guess you've got to lead by example, right? You've got to, at some point, as a mentor to her, you have to lead by example and be vulnerable and be open and come to her with like your stuff. That's kind of the point I'm making. It's like mentor, mentee, you've got to be vulnerable.
That's very interesting. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I've never actually thought about that till you said it, but it's an interesting point. And I think like it's so complex. I was chatting to a psychologist just about life. One of my clients has an amazing psychologist who I chat to as well, and he teaches me a lot of stuff. And because I think sports psychology or general psychology is such an interesting area, right? So I'm always trying to learn from them, ask them questions. And he said, one of the things he said to me was, because it's just after I had my baby, he was like, you can't tell a kid, don't do that, or you can't spend your whole life telling your child, you can't do that, you can't have that, you can't go there, you can't do this, because it's really bad coaching and it's really bad parenting. Yeah, but it's so ingrained into us that that's kind of how we respond. So that's going to be probably one of the biggest things, the hardest things, is to kind of rearrange your natural dialogue so that you're not creating conflict all the time. So if they're doing something you don't want them to be doing, tell them why they shouldn't be and try and reason with them. But saying it out loud, I make it sound like it's going to be easy. I mean, it's going to be really
I can imagine it won't be easy at all, but it is nice to think that at least these things are considerations. Psychology wise, it's a lot of not pressure. You don't want to think of it as pressure. Theme of the talk being pressure, but you're crafting another little human. The things that from the very early developmental years are going to have a big impact on their life going forwards, I guess.
Yeah, true, exactly. You want to build I guess you want to build a relationship that's where they look at you. They don't always look at you like and feel annoyed by your presence, or you're always just there to annoy them, which is, I think, so common, isn't it? So it's going to be interesting. Yeah, for sure. Lots to think about. I mean, I'm glad that we've had this conversation because it makes me think I'm almost unprepared still. I still need to like actually think more about it, because you're almost just like learning on the job, so it's very reactive.
Yes, yeah. But I mean, that's really nice to hear you be vulnerable in that sense, and not, we can't be prepared for everything. We could, if it's your first time parent, you maybe the irony is that you might do a better job or a worse job the second time. You've got 2 kids to look after. You might just be splitting your time, or you might have a bit of experience. I don't know why this talk's become about parenthood, but it just, I guess, just naturally flowed in that direction. But I was just admiring there's a lot to think about and all these things. So it's nice to hear you say that. Do you mind if I flip back to the pillars of fitness and tell you my ones that I think that I've been saying, and you can maybe critique me or whatever, that I've been saying to everyone?
Yeah, I'd love to, mate. Yeah, go ahead.
So what I used to start every chat with is I'd just be like the 4 pillars of wellness, to make sure to try and improve your motivation. So I would do movement, and I try to think of everyone. Like, so no matter if you're 70 years old or you're like 5 years old, I'm trying to think of some really, not vague, but umbrella statements that can apply to everyone. I think it's really important that you move your body and that you enjoy doing so. So no matter what it is, find something that you enjoy to move, and that is the most basic form of exercise. You don't have to get down to fundamentals or strength training or anything like that. You just got to get a move and start that. That's going to start releasing those hormones that we spoke about, and that's going to raise your heart rate, which is super important to have that during the day. So that's one. One was movement. 2 was stress levels. I think that's the one that maybe needs the most work. That I was saying is just to sort of be aware of where you're lying during the day, and then potentially having some techniques, some mindful techniques to manage if it gets too high. Like to have something that works for you, whether it's meditation, whether it's something along those lines, like you said, maybe monotasking on just focusing on or detoxing from social media for a second, and doing the things that you need to do. So nice. I had movement, stress levels, which is the one I think needs work. Nutrition, obviously, like hydration, like everyone's walking around dehydrated. So like making sure that hydration and then just knowing that when I say nutrition, what you're putting in your body and what you're putting into your eyesight and your mind, it has an effect on your thought processes and the way you can perform. So if you're digesting lots of fear-mongering news, or you're digesting lots of scrolling a lot, it's going to affect how you start to think. And then the 4th one being, as we mentioned, sleep. Making sure that quality of sleep scheduling, sleep position, all these things are going to improve. And that's the one I've struggled the most with during the lockdown, definitely.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah, great. That's awesome to hear your reflections on that. And I think you've probably, had some amazing outcomes, and you've really improved people's setups with that philosophy and that kind of nice, simple, but like broad stroke across health and fitness. And, I think, you talked about stress and stuff like that and social media. And I think the one thing that I've been super interested in the last few years, I mean, asked me like 15 years ago about endocrine and hormone system, I would have fallen asleep. Now it's kind of like, I realize it drives everything. It is literally everything. You talk about exercise, enkephalins, endorphins. You talk about social media, it's dopamine. On a small level, microcircuits, dopamine all the time. You get a WhatsApp, you get an email. How many different modes of communication and email and messaging do we have these days? I mean, it's a joke. I got invited to Clubhouse. I'm trying to kind of half embrace it. I don't have time for it. I don't really know if I love the concept.
Yeah.
But you know, we're all completely wired. I mean, it's very rare. It's probably like 1 in 100 that isn't addicted to their phone. It not, you know, some worse than others, but you know, for example, you check your phone in a queue to the shops, you put it back in your pocket, and then you reach in there 20 seconds later to check it again, even though it hasn't vibrated. And that's just 100% chemical. So I love what you say about switching off from it. For me, I stay pretty attached, but I'm pretty focused on, like, I've switched all my notifications off on most things other than like important people that need to get to me. Like, I won't see notifications. And my biggest challenge is actually staying on top of like all the different platforms of communication. Like, someone sends me a direct message on Twitter. I barely use Twitter these days.
Yeah.
And then I feel really bad. I have this guilt. I'm like, oh, this
Yeah.
is from 3 weeks ago, a DM saying, oh, can you recommend someone for this? And then I'm then replying to them, and I feel really bad because I'm replying late. And then I always say to people, just email me, because at least I know it's in one place.
Yeah, I've never really thought about that sense of, you know, that now we've become so accessible on so many different channels that I think it is probably important to solidify where we focus, and maybe there is some research into having like the optimum amount of channels coming in, because if I sit and list them, the ones that are on my phone, not all of them I use, but I list all the ones on my phone, there's probably about 10 different ways to get in contact with me. And that's just,
exactly,
that's probably way too much. But then again, you've got to think of the other side of the story is the guilt that comes with it, like the human emotion that comes with it. If you're a decent person, like, you've got to look after yourself, but then you don't want to come across. When did it become rude to not reply to messages, you know, or to?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I think I caught myself saying to someone earlier, sorry for my delay, and it was like 10 minutes or something. But you know, you're kind of expected to reply instantly. But for me, like, I took a lot of inspiration from Tim Ferriss, I guess, and like the 4-hour work week, and talking to people about that philosophy, and essentially trying to really smash like tasks out within an acute amount of time. So, you know, I'm really these days very like productive in the morning and terrible in the evening. So, you know, try and get a fixed 1 hour in the morning where I can get on top of all my comms, clear everything out, and then I'm quite strict with myself in the day to not be too reactive to just messages coming in and replying to every message as they come in, because otherwise you're actually not getting any tasks done, because you're on a task, your attention's focused on something, then someone messages you, and then your focus goes, and then it takes like 5-10 minutes to get back on point. So I learned a lot from James Hewitt, who talks a lot about cognitive focus and attention span and not losing focus, because life's short and our greatest asset is our time. Whether you're a billionaire or you're poor, you know, time is still your greatest asset. Free time to do the things you want to do. So why would you want to waste 2 hours a day for, you know, 14 hours a week by being inefficient? Do you know what I mean?
And there you were back in the day giving it away for free, mate.
Exactly. Hypocrite.
I'm joking. No, but that's a different. You chose directly where you want to spend your time, your currency. You chose why and where you wanted to spend it, rather than being. It's almost being taken away from you, your time, like by perchance. I don't know if we need to work on on our phone settings, like business, social hours, sleep hours, you know, like start. But then everything becomes so methodical, and do we need framework for everything? And it's tough to find that balance, I guess.
Yeah, I remember I've got a friend in Los Angeles called Greg Mill. He's an amazing coach, and he did something that I copied. He did a 1 hour use on his Instagram, and that was at a point I think where I was using it way too much. And actually, I did it, and it made me use it for periods of the day, just for 10 minutes or 5 minutes, and then not check it like over and over and over throughout the day. So I think, like you say, I think as we keep learning more about the fact that this isn't actually good for us, like being attached to all this technology and communication all day long, that we'll be more strict with our phone settings and stuff. I think at the moment we're still learning. Kind of feel sorry for like teenagers at school. They're just walking around like it's an extension of their hand. I see it, and it's just quite disturbing, to be honest. I'm lucky. We're lucky that we were the day where we had we put £10 on our phones, play Snake, and send a text message, and that £10 would last like 6 months or whatever. It was like, I think 10 text messages.
When we say that though, because I agree with you, and what I agree with now is that if you get access to such thing, then it should be like what my opinions, and through the chats I've had with other people, it should be accompanied with like education straight away, of like down to the bone education, all the flaws, awareness of what you digest, awareness of what you put out, the danger areas, what it affects, the science that it has on your brain, and all these things that come with it. But I am very aware that we probably sound super old by saying that, like, do you know what I mean?
We lost a couple of people there, I think. But no, we've deconditioned our attention spans. Everyone, the whole world, more or less. So we now, we can't even watch like a 16-minute YouTube video about something interesting anymore. It needs to be 3 minutes. Do you know what I mean? That's where we've gone. So and humans are to blame for that. So it's kind of sad. But I mean, look, the world is amazing. The technology, evolution, and everything is just phenomenal. And yeah, there's so many positives. So I don't want to like create a downer on it, because it's obviously
no.
We're on technology right now, doing this. So there's a lot of amazing things to it.
Yeah, it's just the same as anything. You can go, like, I don't want to, I have to be careful, because I do believe in it a lot of the time, but I don't think it applies to everyone. When it can be a little bit harsh, it can be a little bit too binary to just talk about mindset all the time, because people who are not necessarily, myself included, in control of their like emotional state, then it just sounds a bit almost derogatory to like just change your mindset.
Sure,
that's my opinion anyway. I don't know if you agree with that, being like a performance coach.
No, I think that's such an interesting point, because it's kind of how I would come at something as well. If someone said to me, I feel really stressed, then I wouldn't necessarily try and resolve, because what right do I have if they're stressed over a relationship or they're losing cash in their business? I'm not going to try and find a solution, because I probably haven't got one. And maybe secondly, they're going to think, who's this guy trying to give me advice? But what I can do is I can look at other elements that will reduce their perception of stress. So I completely agree with what you're saying, because you can say, okay, well, how are you sleeping? Are you training still? No, I'm stressed. I'm not in the mood. Okay, cool. Maybe we can talk about that. Do you know what I mean? Then you get a window to talk about something that's indirectly going to impact their stress, and make them more resilient to think, well, actually, they might find the solution to their stress, or they might just not care about their stress as much because their body is in a better state because of you optimizing something.
For sure. I love that. I really like that. It's about being, trying our best to be empathetic and receptive, and sometimes people want to talk and just to be heard as well. So I guess with occupation, it can be difficult to put that trigger, that reflex to bed sometimes. But the way you just described about applying it, I think, is really clever, and also ticks the box of empathetic and also almost probably helping.
Yeah, and I think like whether it's your best friends or colleagues or whatever, like certain people respond to advice well and others hate it, and I think it's a control thing. Like if someone likes to be in control, you can't give them necessarily direct advice, so you have to adapt to the individual in front of you, and I think it's then often in cases where I've got an extreme control freak that really you can't give advice to directly, which, you can argue you should never do that as a coach. You should never say, hey, you should do this. It should always be, asking questions to be an effective coach, right? But
Yeah.
if you do have an individual that really is quite, they have to be in control, then I just talk about myself, like, and then I hope that rubs off a little bit. So someone might moan about sleep, and instead of saying, "Oh, have you thought about this?" I'll just say, "You know what, I've been doing," bam, and then that's kind of how I get through to that type of individual. I'm not sure why I thought of that, but
no, it's interesting. But what's also interesting is that you mentioned yourself as a type A personality. So would you include yourself in that umbrella that is bad at taking that kind of thing?
Yeah, no. So I wouldn't say I'm type A, but I can also, like, I don't know if I'm not introverted. Certainly not introverted. I'm extrovert, if anything. But I do like to be on my own as well. So I kind of cross into a little bit of B, because like I need that alone time, and if I don't get it, I go a bit mad. But no, so I'm not like, I like to feel that I'm in control over those core things, like my health, my fitness, as much as you can be in control of your health and stuff. But no, I'm not. Thankfully, I wouldn't say I was a control freak. I hope my mates wouldn't say I'm a control freak.
I didn't actually mean that. I meant more about the taking advice part. Because
yes, can I take advice? Yeah, I guess. Yeah, certainly. I kind of think I've had to grow, particularly within this industry where there's a lot of problem solving, that you take advice all the time from different people, often people that are older than me or more experienced. I look to them for advice, I look up to them, and if it's personal advice, then there's probably, there's only really a few people that can get through on a good level to me, I guess.
Yeah.
Because like I said before, like, if you don't know me really well, then don't try to give deep advice, in a way. It's like,
you gotta, if you want to do that, you just gotta plant the seed and make it somebody else's, their own original idea, isn't it? That's what you gotta do.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, we're just about out of time, Rob. But what I was going to ask you is just to normalize this question. Just asking guys, basically, when they come on, is asking them when the last time they cried was.
Oh wow!
Just to throw that at you.
Yeah, no. To be honest, I haven't cried for a very long time, but I cried like probably 2 days after the baby was born. But yeah, generally, so that was a year ago. Generally, I don't cry, but maybe that's a weakness. But
well, I don't know if it's a weakness or not. Some people would say that crying's a weakness, and then you just saying that you didn't cry is potentially a weakness. Why would you say that?
I think like, I know what you're representing with your platform around men's health, and we as a sex, it's like embarrassing, isn't it? Or it's something that most guys would be ashamed of, or wouldn't want their mates to see. So, not in all cases, but I guess, like, the subject of mental health in the male is much less taboo than it used to be, thanks to stuff like you're doing and lots of other really positive platforms. So, one thing, for example, I've had a few of my close male friends go through like really big challenges, and they don't cry. You can see them suffering, but they don't. So it's like, again, it's something that I think it's quite normal for guys to hold it back.
Yeah, so, I think so. I think so. But it's then again of like, if you have been not, I don't want to, potentially socially conditioned, potentially other things as well, like about not crying. Is it because you can't, or is it because you don't? Like, potentially it gets to a point where you can't do it anymore, or you can't do it very easily anymore, not through lack of emotion, not lack of trying.
Feels so alien because you don't do it.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's super interesting. But what I always like is the honest answer. So thank you for like exploring that question with me. Anyway, appreciate it.
No worries, man.
But yeah, final words from me is, once again, I've taken up enough of your time already, and thank you so much for taking time out of schedule. Hopefully this has been the, you know, you said the ebb in your day, not too heightened, so you've got that little bit of time, and it's getting close to your bedtime soon, mate. 10:30.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's been a pleasure, and it's nice to kind of share what we're both preaching as well, and definitely some positives for me to take away from the chat too, bro. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing your knowledge, teaching me and everyone else listening, man. Really appreciate it, and I'll speak to you soon.
Take care, my man. Yeah, all the best. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.